The card was no larger than his palm, yet Colonel Richard Whitaker kept it longer than any medal he had earned. Pennsylvania, 1962. Rain moved across the farmhouse windows in thin gray sheets, softening the hills beyond the glass until the whole valley looked unfinished. Inside the study, the fire had burned low. A brass clock ticked on the mantel. Books lined the walls in careful rows, most of them unread for years, kept more for order than pleasure. Colonel Richard H. Whitaker sat at his desk with a small wooden box open before him. He was 65 now. His hair had gone white at the temples. The old square strength remained in his shoulders, but age had thinned his hands and slowed the way he reached for things. On the wall behind him hung a photograph of younger men in muddy uniforms, taken somewhere in France after the hedgerows and before the snow. His son, Michael, stood near the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He had come to ask about the estate papers. Instead, he found his father staring at a German medical tag. It was brittle with age. One corner had been darkened by fire or smoke. The string that once hung around a patient's neck was gone. Across the face of the card, faded black letters marked a name Michael could not read. Beneath them, almost hidden by time, was a single red correction line. Not a signature, not a decoration, just one red mark. Michael placed the coffee on the desk. "You kept that from the war?" Whitaker did not look up. "Yes." "A German paper?" "Yes." Michael waited. His father had medals from Normandy, maps from the Ardennes, a German officer's field compass, letters from men who never came home. But this was different. The colonel was not holding the tag like a souvenir. He was holding it like a witness. "Why?" Michael asked. Whitaker's thumb rested near the red line. For a long moment, the room held only rain, clockwork, and the faint hiss of the dying fire. Then the old colonel said, "Because that was the day a quiet German girl corrected me in front of everyone." Michael almost smiled, thinking it was a lighter story than most. Whitaker saw the expression and closed the box halfway. "And saved me," he added, "from giving a deadly order." The smile left Michael's face. Outside, rain struck the window harder. Whitaker leaned back slowly. The chair gave a tired wooden creak. His eyes moved past his son, past the study, past the clean American room with its books and coffee and peaceful walls. He saw Bavaria again. May 1945. A schoolyard turned into a receiving camp. Mud between the cobblestones. Barbed wire across the playground fence. Army trucks parked where children had once played ball. Desks dragged outside and used as registration tables. Chalk still clung to a blackboard inside one classroom. The ghost of a lesson no child had finished. The war had ended. The sorting had begun. That was what no one told civilians about victory. After the shooting stopped, the world did not become simple. It became paperwork. Names, ages, units, diseases, affiliations, missing fathers, silent mothers, children too tired to cry, men claiming they had never believed in anything, women carrying bundles smaller than memory should allow. Whitaker had been 48 then, tall, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven despite the mud. His uniform pressed as well as circumstances allowed. He had crossed France, survived the Ardennes, buried friends, and learned to distrust every delay. He believed in speed. He believed in lists. He believed that chaos killed faster than cruelty when no one was watching. So he ordered the camp to move. Military personnel to the left. Civilians to the right. Sick cases to the classrooms. Suspected contagion behind the warehouse. Questionable files to Captain Miller. Medical review to Dr. Helen Carter. Efficient. Necessary. Wrong. In one place that mattered. Near the back of the women's line stood Lena Vogel. 22 years old. White German. Thin from hunger. Dark blonde hair pinned badly beneath a gray scarf. Her coat was wet at the shoulders. Her shoes were cracked. Both hands held a small cloth bag against her chest. No one noticed her. That was the first mistake. Inside the bag was a red pencil, worn down almost to the wood. She had used it for 3 years in a field hospital near Aachen, copying names onto tags for men who bled, burned, froze, recovered, or disappeared before morning. She knew marks. She knew abbreviations. She knew the difference between danger and weakness. And while American officers shouted orders across the schoolyard, Lena Vogel stood silent in the rain, listening to every word. The school still smelled faintly of chalk. That was what Lena noticed first. Not the rifles. Not the wire. Not the American flag hanging from a second-floor window where a classroom curtain had once moved in spring air. Chalk. Wet wool. Mud. Coffee. The ordinary and the ruined pressed together so tightly that she could not separate them. Inside the building, children's drawings still clung to one wall. Crooked houses, blue rivers, a yellow sun drawn by a hand too young to understand war. Beneath them, American clerks sat at school desks and turned the defeated into categories. Name, age, occupation, military service, illness. Next. The word came again and again, sharp as a stamp. Lena stood in the women's line with her cloth bag held against her ribs. She had learned not to look too long at soldiers. Looking could be mistaken for defiance. Looking away could be mistaken for guilt. So she did what she had done for years in the field hospital near Aachen. She observed. Colonel Richard Whitaker stood near the center of the yard, one glove tucked beneath his arm, issuing orders to men who moved faster when he spoke. He did not shout often. He did not need to. Authority had settled on him the way dust settled on boots after a long march. Captain James Miller shouted enough for both of them. Keep the lines moving. Civilians to the right. Medical tags visible. No one leaves the yard without clearance. He was younger than Whitaker by more than a decade, but carried himself as if strictness could make up for age. His helmet sat low over his brow. His jaw worked even when he was silent. He looked at German faces as though each one might become a lie if he allowed it time. Lena understood that look. She had seen German officers wear it too. At the first registration table, an old woman tried to explain that her husband had disappeared near Würzburg. The American clerk did not understand. The interpreter was busy with another line. Captain Miller waved her forward before she finished. Her name was written incorrectly. Her village became something no map would recognize. Lena heard the mistake. She said nothing. A man in a Luftwaffe coat claimed to be a schoolteacher. Miller ordered him searched. A teenage boy insisted he was 16. His hand said otherwise. Grease beneath the nails. Powder burns near the thumb. He was sent to the military line. A mother asked for water for her child. She was told to wait until processing. Lena said nothing then either. Silence was not cowardice. Sometimes it was triumph. You saved speech for the wound that would kill. Near noon, the rain thinned to mist, and a truck arrived from the northern road carrying 11 displaced Germans from a smaller holding point. They climbed down stiffly, each with a card tied at the neck by string. Medical tags. Some were brown from damp. Some were creased. One had been stamped twice, so hard the ink had bled through the paper. Sergeant Daniel Brooks guided them toward the sorting table. He was older than most enlisted men, with tired eyes and a careful way of touching people's elbows instead of grabbing arms. Lena noticed that. Small mercies were easier to see when everything else was large and loud. The group was pitifully thin. 2 elderly men. 3 women. A boy of perhaps 8. A girl with a cough. For others who looked as if hunger had hollowed them from the inside. The boy stumbled when his shoes met the mud. His mother caught him. The card on his chest swung forward. Lena saw the mark. A blue symbol, blurred by rain, slashed diagonally across the lower corner. Her fingers tightened on the cloth bag. She knew that mark. Not perfectly. Not from here. But from before. Aachen. Winter. A cellar ward lit by oil lamps. Men carried in from roads, their faces gray from blood loss and cold. Tags written fast. Red for urgent surgical review. Blue / for depletion. Severe exhaustion. Malnutrition. Not contagion. Captain Miller saw it differently. He lifted the boy's card, frowned, and called across the yard. Possible infectious group. The mother stiffened. The boy looked at no one. Whitaker turned. How many? 11, sir. Marked for isolation. Lena felt the pencil inside her bag against her palm. Small. Dry. Waiting. Colonel Whitaker gave one quick nod. Behind the warehouse until Carter clears them. The order moved through the yard like a cold wind. Sergeant Brooks hesitated. Only half a second. Then he stepped aside. The group began to move. Lena watched the boy's knees shake. She watched his mother hold him upright with both hands. She watched the blue mark swing against his chest, misread by men who believed speed was the same as accuracy. Still, she did not speak. Not yet. But the silence inside her had changed. Colonel Whitaker did not think of himself as a cruel man. That mattered to him. Cruel men, in his mind, enjoyed the sound of fear. Cruel men struck prisoners because the war had given them permission to become smaller than they had been before it. Cruel men stole watches from the dead, shouted at children, turned hunger into entertainment. Whitaker despised cruelty. He also despised disorder. In the last months of the war, the two had begun to resemble each other more often than he liked. A road outside Bastogne. A barn full of civilians no one had counted. German prisoners mixed with refugees. Wounded men carried on doors because there were no stretchers left. A lieutenant asking for instructions while artillery fell somewhere too close. A woman screaming a name Whitaker could not understand. Order had saved lives there. Or so he told himself. Order had moved the wounded first. Order had separated armed men from civilians. Order had kept panic from becoming a second enemy. Since then, Whitaker had trusted procedures the way some men trusted prayer. In the Bavarian schoolyard, procedure stood on wet cobblestones and wore an American helmet. Captain Miller approached the group of 11 with a clipboard tucked under his arm. "Move them out," he said. Sergeant Brooks glanced toward the warehouse. It stood beyond the main building, low and dark, with one broken window covered in oilcloth. The ground behind it dipped slightly, collecting rainwater in shallow pools. It was the place chosen for isolation because it was separate from the classrooms, separate from the food line, separate from everyone else. Too separate. Even from where she stood, Lena could feel the cold of it. The boy with the medical tag leaned against his mother's hip. His face had the pale, loose look of children who had gone too long without fat or sleep. His lips were dry. When he coughed, it was not the deep, wet cough of infection. It was a small, empty sound, the body protesting its own weakness. Lena's hand moved inside her cloth bag. Her fingers found the red pencil. She did not take it out. Not yet. Captain Miller lifted the boy's tag again. Rain had blurred the blue slash until it widened at one end. He looked at the mark, then at the mother. "Name." The woman stared at him. The interpreter was across the yard. Miller repeated it louder, as if volume could become language. "Name." The woman flinched. The boy answered in German, barely above a whisper. "Emil Bauer." Miller wrote something that looked like Emil Bauer. Lena saw that too. Small errors. Small violences. Names bent until they no longer belonged to anyone. Miller moved to the next card. Same blue mark. Same damp paper. Same assumption. He did not notice that none of them had rash, bleeding, swollen glands, or the glassy stare of fever. He saw a symbol and made a category. Whitaker watched from the center of the yard. He had 3 other lines backing up. A truck waiting at the gate. 2 suspected SS men in a classroom under guard. A medic asking for blankets. A radio message from division headquarters demanding numbers by dusk. 11 people became one problem. The problem had a label. Isolation. "Colonel," Dr. Helen Carter called from the doorway of the first classroom. She was examining a man whose arm had been splinted with fence wire. "I need more light in here." Whitaker turned. "Use the windows. They're painted over. Scrape them." He looked back toward Miller. "Get that group cleared from the yard." "Yes, sir." The order settled. Boots shifted. The 11 began moving toward the warehouse. The mother pulled Emil gently. He tried to walk. His knees bent after 2 steps. She caught him under both arms, but she was not strong enough to lift him fully. An elderly man reached for the boy's shoulder, then nearly fell himself. A few people in Lena's line looked away, not because they did not care, because caring without power was a kind of pain. Sergeant Brooks stepped forward. "I can carry him, ma'am," he said, though she did not understand. He put one hand under Emil's back. The boy's head rolled against his shoulder. That was when the tag turned outward again. The blue mark swung free. Beneath it, in faded German shorthand, Lena saw 3 letters partly hidden by water damage. Airs. Air. Erschöpfung. Exhaustion. Not contagion. Not isolation. Warmth. Broth. Rest. She heard Sister Anneliese from Aachen in memory, tapping a pencil against a stack of tags under candlelight. Red means bleeding first. Black means gone. Blue slash means depleted. Do not confuse depleted with dangerous, Lena. The weak die quietly when placed where no one looks. The weak die quietly. Lena looked at the warehouse. Dark. Cold. Apart. Captain Miller waved Brooks forward. Whitaker had already turned to another officer. The moment was closing. Lena stepped out of line. No one noticed at first. Then a guard saw her. "Hey, back in line." She stopped in the open yard. Rain touched her scarf. Mud clung to the hem of her coat. Her hand came out of the cloth bag, holding the red pencil. The pencil was so short it nearly disappeared in her fingers. The guard moved toward her. Lena did not raise her voice. "Colonel." Whitaker did not turn. The guard reached for her elbow. She spoke again, clearer. "Colonel, the mark is wrong." This time, everyone heard. Everyone heard because the yard had been waiting for one small sound to break it. The rain had softened to mist, but water still dripped from the school roof in steady lines. A truck engine idled near the gate. Somewhere inside the building, a chair scraped across a classroom floor. The 11 marked people had stopped halfway to the warehouse, held between one order and another. Colonel Whitaker turned slowly. Not because he had not heard Lena. Because he had. Captain Miller turned faster. His face sharpened before his body did, the way some men prepared anger before they understood the reason for it. "What did you say?" Lena stood alone in the open space between the women's line and the sorting table. The red pencil rested in her right hand, nearly hidden by her fingers. It looked absurd there. A broken civilian thing in a yard of rifles, helmets, clipboards, and orders. She looked at Whitaker, not Miller. "Sir, the mark is wrong." Miller stepped toward her. "Get back in line." Lena did not move. Sergeant Brooks still held Emil Bauer against one shoulder. The boy's mother stood beside him with both hands near her mouth, afraid to touch, afraid not to. The tag on Emil's chest had turned inward again, its damp string dark against his collar. Whitaker's eyes moved from Lena to the pencil, then to the group near the warehouse. "You speak English?" "A little." "Then use it carefully." "I am." That answer changed something. Not much. Enough for several soldiers to glance at one another. Miller's voice hardened. "Colonel, she is interfering with processing." Lena's expression remained still, but her fingers tightened around the pencil. She knew what interference meant. She knew the shape of a charge before it was written. She had watched men punished for stepping into the wrong corridor, asking the wrong question, holding a paper too long. But she also saw Emil's head on Brooks's shoulder. His lips pale, his eyes half open, the warehouse behind him, cold waiting with the door. Whitaker walked toward her. Each step sounded in the mud. He stopped close enough that she had to look up to meet his face. "Who are you?" "Lena Vogel." "Prisoner." "Civilian medical assistant." "According to whom?" She swallowed once. "According to the hospital that no longer exists." The answer passed through the yard without ornament. It did not defend her. It only named the ruin behind her knowledge. Whitaker looked at Miller. "Bring the boy's card." Miller hesitated. Then he took the tag from Emil's neck and brought it over, holding it by the wet string as if damp German paper might contaminate his glove. He handed it to Whitaker. The colonel studied the mark. Blue slash, blurred edge, 3 faint letters in German shorthand. Ink damaged by rain. To him, it looked like a warning. To Lena, it looked like memory. Whitaker held it out. "Explain." Miller's jaw tightened. "Sir, with respect." Whitaker did not look at him. "I asked her." The yard went quieter. Lena stepped closer to the card. She did not touch it at first. Permission mattered when a person had nothing else. Then Whitaker lowered it slightly, and she pointed with the red pencil. "This is not contagion." Her voice was soft. The pencil tip hovered above the blue mark. "This is depletion. Severe exhaustion. Malnutrition. The old Aachen notation. See here." She pointed to the letters. "Airs. Short for Erschöpfung." Miller exhaled sharply. "We are not in Aachen." "No," Lena said. "But the tag is." No one moved. Whitaker looked at her then, truly looked. Not as a number in a line. Not as a German girl with wet shoes and a cloth bag. As someone making a distinction every armed man in the yard had missed. Lena continued because stopping now would be worse than fear. "If you put them behind the warehouse, they will be away from the stove. Away from water. Away from Dr. Carter. They are not dangerous to the camp." She turned slightly toward Emil. "They are in danger from it." The sentence landed harder than accusation because it was not trying to wound. It was trying to prevent one. Miller's face flushed. "You expect us to take medical instruction from a German civilian?" Lena looked at him for the first time. "No, a beat. I expect you to read the mark correctly." Someone coughed near the registration table and immediately went silent. Whitaker's mouth tightened, but not with anger. Something else had entered him. The unpleasant pressure of public correction. The even more unpleasant possibility that the correction was true. He could feel the yard watching. His men. The prisoners. Dr. Carter at the classroom door. the boy limp in Brooks's arms. Command, he knew, often required deciding before certainty arrived. But pride liked to dress itself as decisiveness. Whitaker turned toward Dr. Carter. Doctor. She crossed the yard, wiping her hands on a towel already stained with iodine. Sir, look at this. Carter took the tag. She read the mark. Then she looked at Lena. Where did you learn this? Aachen Field Hospital. You wrote these? I copied them, sorted them, sometimes corrected them. Carter looked back at the card. The rain tapped softly against her helmet. Then she said the two words that changed the yard. She's right. Miller looked down. Brooks shifted Emil higher in his arms. Whitaker stood with the weight of every watching face pressing against his back. He had been corrected, in front of everyone, by a quiet German girl holding half a red pencil. For one long second, no one knew whether authority would defend itself or become worthy of itself. Colonel Whitaker did not answer immediately. That silence saved him. A lesser man would have spoken too fast. He would have defended the order because it was his. He would have reminded the yard who commanded it. He would have turned one correct sentence from a prisoner into an act of disrespect, then punished the truth for arriving in the wrong uniform. Whitaker felt that temptation. It came hot and quick beneath his collar. He felt Captain Miller watching him, felt the soldiers waiting to see whether their colonel could be challenged, felt the Germans watching too, all those defeated faces searching for proof that victory had only changed the language of power. Dr. Carter still held the tag. Lena stood before him with the red pencil in her hand, thin, wet, and silent now that the necessary words had been spoken. She did not look triumphant. That made the moment worse. Triumph would have given him something to resist. Pride he understood. Defiance he knew how to contain. But Lena Vogel offered neither. She had simply been right. Whitaker looked toward the warehouse. Dark wall, broken window, wet ground. Then he looked at Emil Bauer in Sergeant Brooks's arms. The boy's head rested against the sergeant's shoulder, too heavy with exhaustion to lift. His mother stood beside them, eyes moving from uniform to uniform, trying to read decisions in a language she did not understand. Whitaker had given hundreds of orders in his life. Some under fire, some over maps, some beside roads where men screamed for morphine and there was none left. He knew the shape of responsibility, but this was different. There was no shelling, no enemy line, no tactical emergency, only a child, a mistake, and his own pride standing between them. He turned to Miller. Move them to the warm classroom. Miller blinked. Sir, the 11 marked cases. Warm classroom. Now. Miller's mouth opened, then closed. Whitaker's voice lowered. Do not make me repeat an order in front of the entire yard, Captain. That did it. Miller turned sharply. Brooks inside. Classroom 2. The rest of them with him. Brooks moved at once, carrying Emil carefully, one arm beneath the boy's knees, the other behind his back. Emil's mother followed so closely she nearly stepped on the sergeant's heel. The others came after her in a thin, uncertain line, looking not relieved yet, but less abandoned. Dr. Carter handed the tag back to Whitaker. They need heat, broth, and observation, she said. Whitaker nodded. Take what you need. I need blankets. Find them. I need broth before evening. Use the mess stores. Carter studied him for half a second, then nodded once. She understood the kind of apology soldiers could afford in public. It came disguised as logistics. Whitaker looked at Lena. She had not moved. The red pencil was still in her hand. Rain had softened the hair near her temples. Her coat hung from her shoulders as if it belonged to someone larger. If she was frightened, she had hidden it so well that even fear seemed to respect her privacy. You, he said. Miller turned back, ready to intervene. Whitaker continued. You will assist Dr. Carter with medical sorting. Lena's eyes shifted to Carter, then back to Whitaker. I am a prisoner. You are useful. The word came out harder than he intended. Useful, not admirable, not brave, not forgiven. Still, in the language of the camp, it meant something. Useful people were watched differently, listened to differently, kept near work that mattered instead of lines that erased them. Dr. Carter stepped closer. What did you do at Aachen? Copied intake cards. Marked wounds. Changed dressings. Boiled instruments. Held men down when there was no ether. Several soldiers heard that. No one laughed. Carter's expression changed first. Not softness. Recognition. You can read German hospital shorthand? Yes. Latin drug names. Some. Fever charts. Yes. Good, Carter said. Come with me. Lena hesitated. Not because she did not want to go. Because prisoners learned that moving without permission could become a crime. Whitaker saw it. He gave one curt nod. Go. Lena placed the red pencil back inside her cloth bag and followed Carter toward the classroom. As she passed Miller, he did not step aside quickly enough. For a moment they stood close, the captain and the girl who had corrected the colonel before everyone. Miller looked at her as if he wanted to say something sharp enough to restore balance. Lena did not wait for it. She simply moved around him. No insult. No victory. Only work. Inside classroom 2, the smell of chalk returned, now mixed with damp bodies and stove smoke. Brooks laid Emil on a narrow cot made from 2 desks pushed together. His mother knelt beside him, whispering his name. Carter began issuing instructions. Blankets. Hot water. Check pulses. Separate the coughing girl near the window, not the warehouse. Lena, read every tag before Miller's men move another person. Lena nodded. She took Emil's card from Carter, smoothed it against the desk, and drew one clean red line beneath the blurred blue mark. Not to decorate it. To save it from being misread again. Outside, Whitaker stood in the yard as processing resumed around him. Lines moved. Clerks wrote. Trucks idled. But the rhythm had changed. Men looked twice at the tags now. Miller's voice was lower. Brooks carried blankets without being told. And Whitaker, who had once believed command meant never being corrected in public, stood beneath the gray Bavarian sky and understood something unwelcome. Authority had not diminished when he changed the order. It had become more honest. Across the yard, through the classroom window, he saw Lena bend over the medical cards, red pencil in hand. Small, quiet, necessary. The girl had not raised her voice. She had raised the standard. By late afternoon, the classroom had become a ward. Not officially. Officially, it remained classroom 2 of a Bavarian schoolhouse under temporary American control. A blackboard still covered the front wall. Someone had written arithmetic there weeks before, white numbers fading beneath a thin film of smoke. Above the teacher's desk hung a map of Europe with borders that no longer knew what to call themselves. But the desks had been pushed together into narrow cots. Coats became pillows. Blankets arrived from the supply truck, still smelling of canvas and storage dust. A stove glowed near the corner, giving off a weak orange heat that seemed miraculous after the yard. Tin cups lined the windowsill. Hot water steamed in a wash basin. Dr. Helen Carter moved from person to person with sleeves rolled up, her hair pinned badly beneath her cap. Lena worked beside her. At first, the Americans washed her hands. That was what armed men did when a prisoner stood near medicine, scissors, glass bottles, and sleeping bodies. They watched for hidden violence, for theft, for sabotage, for the enemy they had been trained to expect. Lena gave them nothing to find. She read tags. She checked foreheads with the back of her fingers. She translated names into cleaner spelling for the clerks. She separated exhaustion from fever, fever from infection, infection from fear. When she did not know a word in English, she pointed, demonstrated, or wrote the German beside it in small, careful letters. Carter noticed the handwriting first. "You were trained well," she said. Lena did not look up from a tag. "I was needed." That answer made Carter pause. Need, in war, educated faster than schools. Sergeant Brooks brought Emil Bauer broth in a tin cup and held it while the boy drank. The mother watched every swallow as if counting beads on a rosary. After 3 sips, Emil coughed and pushed the cup away. Lena knelt beside him. "Langsam," she whispered. Slowly. The boy looked at her. He trusted the German word first. Then the American cup. Outside, processing continued in the yard, but the sound had changed. Less shouting. More footsteps. Miller's voice still carried, but its edge had dulled. Twice he sent men to Carter before assigning them. Once, he brought a tag himself and placed it on the desk without meeting Lena's eyes. "Questionable," he said. Lena read it. "Fever. Not contagion. But watch tonight." Carter checked the patient and nodded. Miller took the corrected tag back. He said nothing. For him, silence was the first concession. Whitaker came to the doorway near dusk. He did not enter at first. The room belonged to a different command now, one measured by pulse and warmth, not rank. He stood with one hand on the doorframe, watching Lena bend over the cards under lamplight. The red pencil moved. "A line here." A circle there. A word corrected before it became an order. He had seen men direct artillery with less attention. Carter came over, wiping her hands. "The boy will live if he rests," she said. Whitaker looked toward Emil. "And the others?" "Hungry. Weak. A few infected wounds. Nothing for warehouse isolation." The word struck cleanly. Nothing for warehouse isolation. 11 people had been one order away from being placed in cold, watched too late. Perhaps counted in the morning as unfortunate, but unavoidable. He looked at Lena. "She knew before we did." Carter followed his gaze. "Yes." Lena must have felt them watching, but she did not turn. She was helping Brooks pronounce a woman's name. "Schneider," she said softly. Brooks tried. "Schneider." Lena corrected him without smiling. "Schneider." He tried again. "Better." The woman on the cot opened her eyes when she heard her name spoken correctly. Only her name. Nothing more. Yet some part of her returned to the room. Whitaker saw that too. Names mattered. He had forgotten that in the speed of winning. After sunset, he ordered additional lamps brought into classroom 2 and had the warehouse emptied of unnecessary isolation bedding. Miller received the order in silence. If he disagreed, he did not spend it aloud. Near 9, Whitaker returned alone. Carter was outside speaking with the supply sergeant. Brooks dozed on a chair beside the stove, helmet tipped forward. Emil slept under 2 blankets. The classroom smelled of broth, iodine, wet shoes, and chalk. Lena stood at the teacher's desk, sorting tags into piles. Whitaker approached. She straightened immediately. "You don't need to do that," he said. "I do not know what I need to do." The answer was plain, not bitter. Plainness could be more difficult to answer than anger. Whitaker picked up the card she had corrected that afternoon. Emil Bauer. Blue slash. Red line beneath it. A small correction that had changed the direction of 11 lives. "You embarrassed me today," he said. Lena looked at the card. "Yes." The honesty almost startled him. Then she added, "I did not wish to." "Why speak, then?" She met his eyes. "Because silence would have sent them to the cold." The stove clicked softly. Outside, rain began again. Whitaker held the card a little tighter. For the first time that day, he understood the difference between being challenged and being saved. He placed the card back on the desk. "From tomorrow," he said, "no medical tag is moved until you or Dr. Carter reads it." Lena's expression did not change, but her hand rested near the red pencil. A small thing. Ready. Necessary. Whitaker turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Miss Vogel." She looked up. He chose the words carefully. "Not too much. Not too little. Thank you for correcting me." The room stayed still. Lena lowered her eyes to the tags. "You corrected the order," she said. Whitaker stood there a moment longer. Then he stepped back into the rain, carrying with him the uncomfortable knowledge that truth, once heard, became a command of its own. By morning, the red pencil had become part of the camp's machinery. Not officially. Nothing in the orders mentioned Lena Vogel by name. No typed memorandum declared that a German civilian girl would now stand beside an American doctor and read medical tags before prisoners were moved. Headquarters would not have understood it. Captain Miller would not have endorsed it. Even Colonel Whitaker, who had given the order himself, did not write the reason in his daily report. He wrote only, "Sorting procedure revised to improve medical accuracy." 5 words. Dry, harmless, almost false. But in the schoolyard, everyone knew what had changed. Before a group moved, their tags came to classroom 2. Before a wagon left, Carter checked the names. Before Miller marked anyone for isolation, Lena read the notation, the ink color, the shorthand, the rain damage, the human error hiding inside military confidence. She did not command. She did not raise her voice. She corrected. That was all. And somehow, that was enough to disturb the order of the place. At 7, Sergeant Brooks brought in a stack of tags tied together with bootlace. He set them on the teacher's desk gently, as if paper could bruise. "Morning, Miss Vogel." Lena looked up. The title made several prisoners glance at her. "Mississippi. Not girl. Not prisoner. Not you." She nodded once. "Good morning, Sergeant." Brooks smiled a little, embarrassed by his own courtesy, then stepped back toward the door. Carter noticed and said nothing. She had spent the night with too little sleep and too many patients, but her eyes were sharper now than they had been the day before. She had watched Lena work through fever cases, wounds, hunger, and panic without letting pity make her careless. That mattered. Pity could blur judgment. Lena's kindness did not blur anything. It made her more exact. "Start with the green pile," Carter said. Lena sat at the teacher's desk. The desk still had scratches carved into it by children. Initials. Numbers. A crooked little horse. Her fingers passed over them before she began reading. For 1 second, she was back in a different room before the war, when school smelled only of chalk and rain meant recess had ended, not that trucks would sink into mud beside a wire fence. Then Emil Bauer coughed softly from his cot. Lena returned. She took the first tag. Name misspelled. Age uncertain. No fever mark. Old wound noted incorrectly as fresh. She drew a small red correction line. Then another. The pencil moved with quiet discipline. Outside, the yard filled again. Trucks arrived. Lines formed. Americans called instructions in loud English. Germans obeyed in tired silence. But more than once, a soldier paused at classroom 2 before deciding where someone belonged. Whitaker watched this from the second-floor office that had once belonged to the headmaster. The headmaster's shelves were still there, emptied except for a cracked globe and a jar of dried ink. From the window, Whitaker could see the whole yard. Miller at the registration tables. Brooks near the gate. Carter moving between classrooms. Lena at the desk beneath the window, head bent, red pencil in hand. Small figure. Large consequence. He did not like how often his eyes returned to her. Not from affection, not from suspicion, from correction. She had become a living reminder that authority could miss what silence caught. At midday, Miller brought a file himself. He entered classroom 2 with his helmet under one arm and a look that said he had chosen professionalism against his will. Dr. Carter. Carter was cleaning a bandage tray. Yes. 3 men from the Eastern Line. Tags unclear. One may be tuberculosis. Lena reached for the papers. Miller held them a fraction too long. Carter looked at him. He released them. Lena read the first card, then the second. On the third, she stopped. This one must be separated. Miller's eyes sharpened. So now it is contagion? Yes. The simplicity of the answer defeated the trap before it formed. Lena pointed to the notation. Not because of this mark. Because of this one. Blood and sputum. Night fever. Weight loss. He should not be with the others. Carter came to look. After a moment, she nodded. She's right. Again. The words were quieter this time, but Miller heard them as loudly as before. He took the corrected card. For a second, he looked at Lena as if trying to decide whether to hate her or depend on her. Dependence won, though not gracefully. "Thank you," he said. The phrase came out stiff, almost damaged. Lena looked up at him. "You are welcome." No triumph. No softened smile. Only the work passing cleanly between them. By evening, 14 people had been moved away from danger because of corrected tags. 3 had been isolated properly. 2 had been given food before questioning. 1 old man had been identified by his correct name after Lena recognized the village spelling. None of it looked dramatic. No one applauded. No one said the camp had changed because a quiet German girl had corrected an American colonel in the rain. But when Whitaker walked through classroom 2 after dark, he saw Emil Bauer sleeping beneath a blanket instead of shivering behind the warehouse. He saw Miller wait for Carter's answer before moving a patient. He saw Brooks speaking names more carefully. He saw Lena sharpen the red pencil with a small knife, saving every shaving as if nothing useful should be wasted. Whitaker stopped beside the desk. "You have made us slower," he said. Lena did not look up. "Yes." Then she brushed the red dust from the tag and added, "But not later." Whitaker understood. Slower now. Not later with Graves. He stood in silence for a moment, then nodded once. It was not a salute, but it was no longer dismissal. By the third day, no one in the schoolyard called Lena Vogel ordinary anymore. They did not call her extraordinary either. War did not give such words easily. It gave numbers, duties, categories, shortages, lists. It gave men reasons to look away and women reasons to keep moving after their bodies asked to stop. But it also gave certain small recognitions, passed quietly from hand to hand like contraband. A clean blanket placed where she would need it. A cup of coffee left on the teacher's desk without comment. A stack of medical tags protected from rain beneath a helmet. Sergeant Brooks began doing that. He would arrive each morning with damp shoulders and a careful stack of cards tucked inside his jacket. He never made a ceremony of it. He simply placed them beside Lena's red pencil and said, "For review." Not orders. Not suspicion. Review. Captain Miller still did not like her. Lena could feel it when he entered a room. Some people brought cold with them. Miller brought judgment. Yet even he had learned to pause before moving the sick. He no longer read a mark once and trusted himself completely. He checked. He asked Carter. Sometimes, when Carter was elsewhere, he asked Lena without looking directly at her. Is this one fit for transport? Not today. How long? 1 day? Maybe 2. And this? Fever. Separate, but warm. He disliked how useful she was. He disliked more that his dislike no longer mattered. Colonel Whitaker watched these changes without announcing that he watched them. He walked the yard each morning, gloves behind his back, boots dark with mud, expression unreadable. But he stopped more often near classroom 2. He read the revised lists. He asked Carter for the medical count. He listened when Lena corrected a name, a mark, a dosage copied badly from a German packet. Listening became the first surrender of his pride. Not public, not dramatic, but real. On the 4th afternoon, a convoy arrived carrying prisoners from a bombed railway station. The line was worse than the previous ones. Men with smoke-blackened faces. 2 women carrying a third between them. A boy with a bandaged hand. An elderly priest who kept apologizing in 3 languages because he could not stand straight. The rain had stopped, but the yard had not dried. Lena stood at the sorting table beside Carter. Her red pencil was shorter now, sharpened almost to nothing. She had wrapped thread around the end so she could grip it. Her eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep. Still, when the first card reached her, her hand steadied. Name, age, mark, condition, truth beneath damage. 1 woman was listed as feverish. Lena noticed the fever mark had been copied from the wrong tag. The woman was cold, not fevered. Shock. She needed blankets, not isolation. 1 man was marked as fit for labor. Lena saw the yellow tint in his eyes and touched 2 fingers lightly to his wrist. Too weak. Liver trouble, perhaps. At least not work. Then came the priest. His card was almost unreadable. Miller stood nearby, waiting. Carter. Carter was across the room with the injured boy. Miller looked at Lena. The hesitation lasted 1 second. Miss Vogel. The title reached Whitaker, who stood outside the door. Lena took the card. She read what remained of the ink, then looked at the priest's face. His lips trembled. His hands moved slightly, not in prayer, but from exhaustion. Not infectious, she said. But he must sit. Now. Miller turned to a soldier. Chair. No argument. No delay. The priest sat before his knees failed. Whitaker saw it. A life saved not by drama, but by corrected timing. That evening, when processing finally slowed, Whitaker entered classroom 2. The lamps were lit. The blackboard still held old arithmetic. Beneath it, Lena sat alone at the teacher's desk, copying corrected names onto a clean roster Carter had given her. Her handwriting was precise, almost beautiful. Whitaker stopped across from her. You should sleep. So should you. The answer came before caution could stop it. She looked up, perhaps expecting anger. Whitaker surprised them both by almost smiling. I have officers to do my work badly when I rest. Lena lowered her eyes to the roster. That is unfortunate. The corner of his mouth moved again. Not quite a smile. Nearer than before. For a moment, the room softened. Not into friendship. Not into forgiveness. Into something more difficult and more honest. Respect without forgetting. Whitaker placed Emil Bauer's old medical tag on the desk. The one with the blurred blue slash. The one she had corrected in red. I'm sending this with the daily file, he said. Headquarters may want an explanation. Lena looked at the card. If they read it wrong, explain slowly. This time he did smile. Small. Tired. Human. Then she reached for the tag, turned it over, and wrote a clearer notation on the back. Severe exhaustion. No contagion. Warmth required. She pushed it back to him. So they do not need pride to understand. The words were gentle. They still struck. Whitaker folded the card carefully and placed it inside his field notebook instead of the outgoing file. Lena noticed. You are not sending it. Not this one. Why? He looked at the red line beneath the blurred mark. Because some corrections should be kept close. She did not ask what he meant. Perhaps she understood. Perhaps she was too tired. Outside, the last truck pulled away from the schoolyard. Its engine faded down the road. In classroom 2, the stove clicked softly. Carter slept in a chair near the wall. Brooks snored by the door with his helmet on his knees. Miller's voice was distant now, lower than it had been days before. Whitaker stood with the card in his notebook. Lena sat with the red pencil in her hand. Both of them knew she would be transferred soon. Everyone was being moved somewhere. Camps were temporary. Orders outlived rooms. People who had become necessary in one place could vanish by morning paperwork. But for that night, at least, the line held. Not the line of wire outside. Another line. The one a quiet girl had drawn in red between error and consequence. Between pride and truth. Between command and conscience. By the time the schoolyard emptied, Lena Vogel had already gone. That was how Whitaker remembered it. Not as an ending with hands raised in farewell or words spoken at the gate. The Army rarely allowed such shape to human departures. People arrived by truck, were sorted by table, shifted by order, filed under names that did not always fit them, and then disappeared into another system before gratitude, regret, or understanding had time to become speech. Her transfer came before dawn. A larger processing center to the south needed German-speaking medical assistants. Dr. Carter had written the recommendation herself, though she pretended it was only practical. Captain Miller had signed the movement list without comment. Sergeant Brooks had found Lena a better pair of shoes from the supply pile and left them beneath the teacher's desk while she slept. Lena did not sleep long enough to use them properly. At 4:30, the truck engine started outside classroom 2. The sound woke half the ward. Emil Bauer opened his eyes from beneath 2 blankets. His mother sat beside him, one hand on his shoulder. The priest lifted his head. Carter stood in the doorway with her coat pulled over her nightshirt, hair unpinned, eyes red from exhaustion. Lena folded her cloth bag. Inside it, almost nothing remained. A spare stocking, a torn notebook, a crust of bread wrapped in paper. The red pencil, now shorter than her thumb. She placed the pencil on Emil Bauer's medical tag, the one Whitaker had kept in his notebook the night before. Carter had brought it back for the transfer record. The red line still cut beneath the blurred blue mark like a small wound that had healed cleanly. "Take it," Carter said. Lena shook her head. "It belongs to the file." Carter looked at her for a moment. Then she understood that Lena was not refusing a gift. She was leaving evidence. Outside, Whitaker arrived as the first gray light touched the wire. His gray coat was buttoned wrong at the throat. He had dressed quickly, which annoyed him because it proved he had cared enough to hurry. Lena stood near the tailgate with 3 other women selected for transfer. She looked smaller in the early light. Younger. The scarf around her hair had slipped, showing a loose strand of dark blonde hair against her cheek. Her face carried no triumph, no complaint, no expectation that anyone would remember her once the truck turned south. Whitaker stopped before her. "Miss Vogel." "Colonel." He held out a folded paper. "Authorization for medical work at the next facility." Dr. Carter added her recommendation. Lena took it with both hands. "Thank you." The words were correct. Quiet. Almost formal. Whitaker wanted to say more. He wanted to say that she had changed the camp. That 11 people had slept warm because she had spoken. That he had mistaken silence for ignorance, and speed for command, and pride for strength. But men like Whitaker had spent too many years learning to cut feeling into smaller pieces before speaking. So he said only, "They should listen to you there." Lena looked at the truck. "They may not." "No," he almost smiled. "They may not." A guard called for boarding. Lena stepped onto the truck, then turned once. She reached into her bag and took out the red pencil. For a second, Whitaker thought she meant to keep it after all. Instead, she held it out to him. He did not take it. "It is yours," he said. "It has done its work here. That does not mean it is finished." "No," Lena said. "But perhaps you are the one who needs it now." The sentence settled between them, soft and exact. Whitaker took the pencil. It weighed almost nothing. The truck pulled away minutes later. Lena did not wave. She sat facing forward, hands folded in her lap, already becoming another figure in another line of history no report would fully hold. Whitaker stood until the road emptied. Then he returned to classroom 2. On the teacher's desk lay Emil Bauer's tag. Blue mark. Red correction. A name spelled correctly because Lena had insisted names were not decorations on paper, but proof that someone had been seen. Whitaker placed the tag inside his field notebook beside the pencil. He never saw Lena Vogel again. For years, that fact troubled him more than he admitted. After the war, America wanted its soldiers home and its stories clean. Germany rebuilt from rubble. Men who had once shouted orders in muddy yards sat behind desks, married, raised children, learned to speak of the war in sentences short enough for dinner tables. Whitaker became careful with his memories. He told the acceptable ones. The cold at Bastogne. The hedgerows in Normandy. The first time he saw Paris after liberation. He did not often speak of the Bavarian schoolhouse, the 11 people nearly sent behind a warehouse, or the quiet German girl who corrected him before everyone and did not make him smaller by doing it. In 1962, in Pennsylvania, he opened the wooden box and showed the tag to his son. Michael held it carefully. Did you ever find out what happened to her? Whitaker shook his head. No, the answer was honest. Incomplete, but honest. Michael studied the red line. She embarrassed you? Whitaker looked toward the rain on the window. Yes. Then he looked back at the tag. And thank God she did. The room became still. The old colonel reached into the box and took out the pencil too. Short, dull, wrapped near the end with old thread. He placed it beside the card. I commanded men for 30 years, he said. But that day, a prisoner taught me the hardest part of command. Michael waited. Whitaker touched the red line with one finger. To let truth outrank pride. Outside, the rain moved across the Pennsylvania fields, quiet and steady. Inside, the tag lay between father and son, no larger than a palm, carrying the weight of a schoolyard, a child's breath, a wrong order stopped in time, and a girl who had spoken only because silence would have buried the weak. She had not raised her voice. She had raised the standard.